Jessica Hyde?
Is she a customer? Because if she's a customer, I can find her. I can find her on the
Where is Jessica Hyde?
It's called the Utopia experiments.
Do you fucking understand your mission?
Bon ben voilà, on a vu cette projection avec une scène de fin bien solide. On va faire donc le débat en anglais, comme vous le savez, et je vais demander aux intervenants de se présenter un petit peu. I'd like you to introduce yourself just in a few words before we talk about that series, you know, how you did it and why is it so violent.
Hello, I'm Rebekah Wray-Rogers. I was the producer of Utopia. I didn't know what to say about it.
Well, give us a little bit about your background.
Okay,
just
so
shortly.
Utopia was the second TV series that I produced. Prior to that, I produced a TV series called This Is England '88, which was Shane Meadows, a filmmaker, and I suppose my interest was in making those kind of TV series and working with directors like Shane and Marc. Prior to that, I'd been a line producer and did This Is England and a film called Four Lions, which was Chris Morris.
And on this one, you told me yesterday you came on board not at the beginning but a little after.
Yeah, I was invited by Kudos to come in about first draft stage.
Well, we'll come to that later. And what about you? What's your background in terms of as a director?
Well, I started off as an assistant director in independent British films, so I assisted people like Mike Leigh, Terence Davis, Derek Jarman, all quite well-known auteurs in the sort of 80s and 90s, and then started making my own documentaries on Super 8, and someone asked me to make some documentaries for the BBC, so that's how I started. Sort of as an independent filmmaker going into the BBC. And then it was a sort of natural transition to drama from there. So I've been sort of directing drama for probably about 15 years or something, but have been lucky enough to be able to sort of, I mean, I see as what we're doing as being on the fringes of television in a way. You know, it really feels like we're on the periphery in some sort of way.
Far away from.
Yeah, mostly, because most television is not drama, you know, and it's certainly not edgy drama.
And you said you have been directing in the States, right?
Yeah, for my sins. Yeah, I just went to, what I've done mostly is sort of authored mini-series or one-offs, and I have done one series before. This is only the second series that I've done, but I did go to do a new American series in the States called Black Sails, where I just did 2 episodes just now, which my American agent persuaded me to do.
Just as a short parenthesis, working as a director in the States is very different from working in England, or not that much?
I think it probably is because it's all very writer and producer driven. I think that is the case. It can be the case in Britain as well. If you're doing long-running series, but I've never done those long-running series. I've managed to get involved in projects where I'm working quite closely with the writer and the producers early on in the process, rather than taking on a format or taking on a style or having to do it in the style of the series so far. But I think probably America works like Britain, maybe like France, I don't know, in as much as if you're doing long-running series, there's no point that they don't want directors who've got a distinctive vision, which might be at odds with the show. That would be pointless. They don't want every Downton Abbey to look different. I mean, they want people to bring their own skills to it, but it needs to, the whole piece needs to be as a whole.
So before we go into what is Utopia, because we just get a little bit of it today, when was it on the air?
So it started screening on Channel 4 January the 15th, and then it was weekly on Tuesday nights at 10 o'clock.
And you have, I think, what, 10 episodes?
Six
episodes. And what was the success of that series?
Critically, it went down brilliantly. So the responses were fantastic, and actually I don't think it could have gone down better. In terms of ratings, I think the channel, they weren't disappointed. It did well in its slot, but it didn't blow anyone away. And actually what was quite interesting is that it was quite difficult to tell what the ratings were. So the first time...
Why was it?
Well, because the consolidated ratings were difficult to track. So to actually find who was watching it on demand and who was watching it, it seemed to show that people were watching TV in a slightly different way. So
it seems in England that the people watching it on replay or catch up is really big. And in your ratings, I was asking people from Suffrage, and they said they have 8 million viewers on the series, but part of that is about 1 or 2 million in catch up.
Yeah,
and it's not so easy to
catch up
track.
is massive. And yeah, it's not so easy to track because I think it's relatively new territory. So trying to work out who'd watched it on 4OD but on YouTube was different to watching it on 4OD from 4OD's figures and stuff like that. So as far as I could tell, it was difficult to try and work that out. Eventually they worked out, I think, that it was about 1.5 million average across all the episodes, which was much higher than it originally looked.
Which I guess for Channel 4 in this time slot is a good rating.
It's really, really good, yeah, but it took a long time, it took weeks to work that out.
So what is Utopia? You know, you're going to have to tell us a little bit about what the series is telling us. We had the first episode, we just had a little chunk of it. So what is Utopia? Before we go on, how it started.
It's a black comic conspiracy thriller about a shady organisation that is doing something which is only revealed in the later episodes. And then when it's revealed as to what they're doing, some people might think it's quite a benign thing that they're doing. So, yeah, without giving too much away, that's what it is. It's a conspiracy theory about this network.
I'd be tempted to ask you what is it at the end, but I don't know, do you want to know what's at the end or you don't? No, simply doesn't know.
But I think what's interesting about the writing, about Dennis's writing, is that this network, this organisation, will stop at nothing to achieve this end. But actually, what they're trying to achieve is not an evil end. So I'll give you that. That's
bad thing for good cause.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So nobody wants to know about the end, right? Okay. So some people are going to try to get it online and watch the whole thing. So how did it start? I know you were not at the beginning, but you know the track record of that.
Okay, so I think actually it started with a different channel, so it wasn't Channel 4, it was a Sky project, and I think that there were some ideas banding around, and Dennis was given an idea to go away and
So you
play.
have to say, who was Dennis?
Dennis Kelly is the writer.
So he's the one who started the project from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually from an idea that was somebody else's idea, but he took that on, took it off in a certain direction and completely made it his own and took it off into what Utopia is today. And that channel actually passed and thought that isn't for them. So he talked to Kudos about it, took it to Channel 4 and they...
The production company is Kudos, which is part of Shine.
That's right, yeah.
So Kudos is doing the R, right? The show master here.
Hustle, they did feature films, all sorts.
So Kudos now is one of the leading television company in England,
Yeah.
doing a really innovative primetime show.
Doing what?
Innovative primetime shows.
Yeah, I mean, Utopia is way off to left field for Kudos, I would say. It would be an unusual...
I don't know how the audience reacted, but I mean, for all of us, this is pretty daring. I mean, in terms of violence, in terms of visual. I mean, in television, it's rare, which is something so bold. I mean, the scene of the eye, obviously, which is really like, turning away or leaving the room or, like this. How were you able to get so much violence on screen for television? Did you get the channel went are you crazy or not really?
I think the Channel 4 are very supportive to filmmakers who have something really significant that they want to say, and I think the channel understood right from the beginning that this was about something. It wasn't gratuitous violence, that the violence was all part and parcel of what the underlying voice was of what Dennis was trying to say and what Marc was realising on screen. And therefore, although they were all over it, so we had lawyers and compliance going through the script in detail and talking through with me on a daily basis exactly how we would film stuff.
Is this a process you have on every show, or it was specific on this one that you bring all these lawyers and people checking the legal aspect of it?
It's been on everything I've ever made, but then I tend to make this kind of thing. I think it's on everything. I think it just may be less noticeable on something that doesn't throw up so many issues.
You mean it's an American system of what we insurance and...
No, it's not insurance. Compliance is a part of Channel 4, so there are lawyers within Channel 4 who will go through your script with a fine-tooth comb and then create a really good relationship with you, because ultimately they want you to be able to achieve what you want to be able to do, but they want to make sure that what you do won't breach Ofcom regulations or cause them any legal issues, and it's within the bounds of taste and decency, and it's going to cause more than 33 complaints.
And then, did you have any problem on that scene, for example, which honestly is really strong?
Yeah, there was lots of discussion. So lots of discussion with Marc about how he was going to do it, and then lots of feeding that back to Channel 4, and kind of there were limits put to, not particularly that scene actually, but in episode 3.
There's more? There's more than I've seen in 3.
It gets worse.
There's more down online in this room. I know. What is more in episode 3?
Well, there's a school massacre in episode 3. But I think the interesting thing about this is you don't really see a lot of violence. You certainly never see his eye coming out. I don't, and also in episode 3 you don't ever see any children being killed. I mean, I think it's all, it's all the best, the most effective violence. And we can talk about why it's violent, but it's in the mind. You bring that to
suggestion.
it, so it's in suggestion. So it's not really explicitly violent.
I heard it was on the air or in production when we got that massacre in a school in the USA, and it was a problem for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Channel 4, because massacres happen in schools. Every year that does happen, so I think we were always aware that might happen. It was in the script in advance, and that's partly why Dennis had written it in there, because it is something that does happen. Then, of course, there was the Connecticut massacre, and that happened in a kind of October, and we were going out in the January, so there was a big discussion at that point about how that should affect us. Should we actually push the transmission date back? And what Channel 4 decided to do was to proceed, but they changed the marketing campaign quite dramatically. So the marketing campaign did have Arby with a gun, and the gun was taken off, and it also had Grant, who's the 11-year-old boy.
Who's Arby?
Arby's in the comic shop, he's the killer.
Okay.
Actually, it's Lee who's the killer, but Arby's the guy who's looking for the manuscript. So the decision was made to change the marketing as opposed to take the series off the air or move it.
So at what point the director of Humour started to work as a writer? I mean, is it like a writer series more? Is it a director series? Is it like read together? When we watch the episode, we wonder sometimes, is the film about the ambience that you gave to that series, the look, the music, the visual aspect? How much of that was in the writing of the show?
I mean, Dennis wrote a brilliant script, but Marc, we searched for a auteur director who would take that and take it into a whole new realm, and that's, I think, exactly what Marc's done. So we were talking to a journalist earlier, just at the opening scene, you've got the moment where Arby puts the little bit of paper on the table that says manuscript, and that uncurls. Dennis didn't write that slowly that uncurled. Marc decided that slowly that should uncurl, and that in itself was the way that Marc has brought the tone and the visual look of that to tell the story in an even more powerful way, I think, from the way that Dennis originally wrote it.
But I think it's important, and this is the same in film as it is in television. I mean, for me as a director, I'm getting everything from that script, whether it's explicitly in the script or not. I'm feeding off that what the writer's world is. It definitely. There's no. Actually, I think Dennis has written a whole lot of. He'd written some pop music in this, hadn't he? There was a sort of he'd written tracks by the Brian Jonestown Massacre and people like that. which I just immediately ignored. But I do think that the humour of the music and what we did with the visuals somehow it is sparked off by what's in that original script. I sort of feel it all felt quite organic in a way, even though lots of stuff wasn't in the script. Like when we cut outside the comic shop at the beginning, the bunny and the charity bin is not in the script. The yellow bag is not a big feature of the script at all. He's carrying a yellow bag, but we made it into a big yellow bag. And then the bag is like a smiley face. It's got a little it's got a little smile on, and we're always tracking towards the bag. And I sort of feel that's innate, that's intrinsic to the piece. And somehow I feel I've unearthed a little piece of Dennis Kelly's mind and put it in there.
Is it the type of series where you get the scripts and you do your directing and the writers is not involved at all, or at the contrary, you can work together a lot, he goes on set with you, gives you ideas and feelings about casting and all this stuff?
It's certainly not. He was involved. I mean, certainly we worked on the script together. I came on reasonably early with Becky and we worked on various drafts of the script. I'm not consulting him about every single element. I didn't ask him whether he wanted a big yellow bag. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I'm not, I don't think film directing is democratic in that sense. You've got to be a dictator, But I think it's incumbent on the director to be excavating the contents of your writer's mind, getting the layers. Getting beneath the layers. So for instance, I will rehearse in a rehearsal room with actors before I go on set. I'll rehearse every scene. And if there are scenes where I have questions, or if there are scenes that I think they should be better, or scenes where there are problems with the character, then I'll bring Dennis in and we'll work it through with Dennis in the rehearsal room. So Dennis was totally involved in the rehearsals and the excavation of the subtext in the script. I think that's really, really important. He also had various pictures in his mind about what the casting should be like. But even in that so there was a consultation there, but even in that case, there were people that he just didn't think were, he hadn't imagined them like that. And of course, casting is always that process. I mean, the girl that plays Becky, Alex Roach, her Welshness, the fact that she's so Welsh and she's so sort of chippy, that's not in the script, obviously. That's what there's an alchemy there that happens, with those people, with the whole production where little accidents and things come together and you create something more than the writing. So, in answer to your question, yes, working really, really close with the writer, but there's a point at which you start on the set shooting, and then it's all down to the director after that.
At one point it becomes your series.
It has to be, yeah.
I think what really helped with that is Dennis really trusted Marc. So because you'd excavated the script and really gone through the process in pre-production of really trying to understand what was in Dennis's head, Dennis did completely trust Marc. So there might be occasional phone calls to me going, I've seen filming a bunny outside the comic shop, what the hell's going on? But ultimately we knew it would be all right.
How long the process of writing was to write the 6 scripts?
Well, I think there'd been about 8 months before I came on board, so I think there'd been a slow process of about 8 months where the first drafts were written. And then it was probably about another 4 months before we started shooting.
And you came on board at what time in this process? Or
probably about 4 months before we went into pre-production.
So you came ready when it was almost finished?
Well, he'd certainly written all 6 episodes, and they were in first draft form, yeah.
And was it a difficult process to get to those scripts? I mean, was that the first draft was kind of good, or you had to go to extensive writings and rewritings?
Well, Dennis doesn't like writing treatment, so I think he does do lots of drafts because he doesn't really want to plan it out first. From what I understand, I mean, Dennis is a really collaborative writer and is good at working with the execs and having meetings and taking criticism and interrogating what people are saying to him. So it was actually a very positive process. But yeah, the scripts did go through numerous drafts. I mean, we're doing series 2 at the moment, and they're also going through numerous drafts.
And so in terms of, can we talk about budget, you know, the production aspect, the cost of this, you know about this of course, and can you tell us?
Okay, so each episode was £850,000, which is
£850,000.
which is in euros, I don't know, about 900,000 euros.
Years, about, yeah, 120, I guess.
Combien?
Yeah, 1 million.
Okay, and that was 800 of that was provided by Channel 4 and 50 was provided by Shine. And it was tight, it was really, really tight.
Is it by English standards an expensive series, or it's a normal budget?
For Channel 4 it's, well, I think it's a normal, I mean this is high-end drama for the UK, but it's in the low end of the budget for high-end drama. And I think they've recognised that. We're getting a bit more this time for Series 2.
And so in terms of production, you had the normal shooting days, like you have for a series, like 8 or 10 days per episode? And
we had 12. I mean, this is the thing, we're trying to make, I think our approach is more like independent filmmaking than ordinary TV production. And the creatives, the production designer and the cinematographer, and all those people come from the independent film world. So I think that's how we approach it.
When you say all those people, I guess you're talking about the DOP, talking about this part of the crew, right? They're more. It looks more like a film in a way. The image, and we'll talk about the music afterward, but the visual, the framing is really much a movie thing. So you brought actually on board more movie people than television people. That was a willing you had.
Yes, I always work with a variety of people. I tend to work with new people each time, but in Britain, people are not. There's not enough of the movie industry to sustain all those people. So Ulla Birkeland, who's a Norwegian cinematographer who lives in Britain, had done pop videos, commercials. He did a great film called The Arbor. By the director Clive Barnard that won the Director's Fortnight this year for a film. So he'd done but that was a low budget film, so he'd done a low budget feature. He'd done a lot of TV comedy and things. So people were from all sorts of worlds, but I think most people that work in Britain are, unless you're working in Hollywood as well, people work in both the film and the TV world. But I'm always interested in getting people that have done something a little bit interesting, special, and off-piste.
For example, the photography is really a choice, a specific choice in this series that we don't see so often. So you had this in mind, you had your DOP in mind to do that?
I knew what I wanted to do in terms of making a widescreen, sort of Kubrick-influenced, one-point perspective drama. Ulla Birkeland had never done anything like this before. If you watch The Arbor, it's very sort of social realist, but beautifully shot. But it's not quite like this. So I wasn't casting him because he had done this before. I just felt like he was a great collaborator, and he really understood the tone of the show, and then we worked together to make this piece like it is.
Is it film on film, on digital?
No, it's on digital. It's shot on the Epic, which is the latest red camera.
And I guess the post-production aspect on the filming itself is a lot of work.
Well, it's graded. I mean, it's graded in the normal time that you get to grade a TV program. I mean,
it's graded in the normal time that you give.
You can evaluate his film look.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think we probably give it at least double the amount of time that a TV drama would usually be expected to be graded in. But it needs that. That's what I think you need to do to be able to make something like this. That's what I mean by kind of a more filmic approach rather than a TV approach. it's not been churned out.
When you edit the series, do you bring the writer sometime into the editing room?
No, never. I mean, obviously,
So you're a dictator.
no, of course not. Dennis Kelly was an executive producer along with Jane Featherstone and Karen Wilson and the network and Piers Wenger from Channel 4 and Becky. So when we had screenings, there'd be sort of five people there. But I'm not sitting with the writer in the cutting room. That would be disastrous. But obviously,
I mean, not sitting with him the whole process, but at one point bring him inside and show him this is what the first cut we have, and
I'll show a cut when I'm happy with it and it's finished. You know, obviously, that's what you have to do as a director, and then I will take on all those criticisms. You know, but you know, as I said before, that's not democratic. I mean, I think it's really important as a director to listen to other people, because I think you get really close to the material, you know. And by the time I've done my first cut, I want people to come in. I want Dennis to come in and talk to me about it. I want Becky to give me notes. That piece doesn't make sense, or you're taking this for granted, or you know. And I think as a director, you've got to be robust enough to take that criticism.
which means if Dennis, the writer who has been thinking of that series for, I guess, 1 or 2 years, gives you notes or impression about what works, doesn't work, you do that.
I think some notes you do, some notes you don't. I think, this happened to be a particularly happy creative process because, as Becky said, there was a lot of trust there. I have gone through processes in the past on other shows where a writer will give you notes which are really to do with what he originally wrote, sort of pedantic notes, line notes, which are nonsense, you know. But this didn't happen in this case, you know. And so I think, you know, I think that was a testament to the sort of enlightened and way in which the whole thing was approached.
Slightly different in Block 2. So Block 2, episodes 4, 5 and 6 were directed by a directing duo, Alex Garcia and Wayne Yip.
Oh, you have 2 directors.
Yeah, 2 directors directed together on the final 3 episodes.
You did the 3 first ones for 3 hours. Why did you want to take other directors for the whole thing? We had series done on 6 but by just 1 director, so why did you do that?
There wasn't the time. There's no way we could have fitted in with the transmission schedule, and if Marc had directed all of them. That was the single reason.
You had kind of double shooting many times? 2 crews working at the same time?
Well, we did, but actually with the same director. But it's no, just in terms of the post-production schedule. I mean, Marc needed to be in the edit suite. He couldn't be in the edit suite and shooting at the same time. So we were shooting Block 2 while Marc was editing Block 1. But that, I don't think the same level as trust. Alex and Wayne did a great job, but their relationship with Dennis was slightly different, and I think Dennis was in the edit suite with them all the time.
I guess if you did the 3 first one, you were giving the tone of it. I mean, the choice of photography and music, that was your imprint on that series, and the director coming after you had to follow that.
Very much in that they were employed absolutely to try and continue on.
And if we didn't know which film, can we tell that episode is directed by Marc and that one by the other guys, or it's really pretty much the same?
I think generally people haven't particularly noticed, and a lot of people have said that they feel it's relatively seamless. I mean, I think we all feel that it's noticeable, and I have seen reviews where people have noticed it, but they tend to be the real geeky kind of director spotter type reviews.
The music obviously plays a big role in that series. So explain us your approach about the music.
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, I wanted to make music which was... whenever I work with a composer, I always start with a lot of references which will send to each other. Cristobal Tapia de Vere is a Canadian composer who has done very little, actually. I met him in Montreal a couple of years ago when I was doing a series called The Crimson Petal and the White, and he'd only ever done a documentary before. He's a dance music producer, he's a pop musician, And we got on really, really well for that series. And so I brought him over to England to do this. So it's only really the second series he's done. He arrived with a dried rhino turd.
A what?
Dried rhino dung, shit, dry, and a human femur that he got from the Atacama Desert, and
Like a bone.
yeah, a bone.
So,
And a
dried rhinoceros shit and a human bone.
Yeah,
We are in England.
yeah,
In England.
and his laptop with his samples in, and that was his palette for the whole piece.
Why the bone and the rest of it? What?
He said that the acoustic qualities of the dried rhino dung were peerless. They couldn't be replicated by any samples.
If you go on YouTube, actually, you can see him playing his rhino turd with his femur bone, and
Yeah.
there is actually
Yeah.
alongside. So you can
Yeah, so
hear what he's
that's
doing.
so the rhythm. A lot of the rhythm is from this dried rhino turd. So
I'm sure if we had done this before, we would have looked at it differently.
but he's a sort of special kind. I think he's a genius. But our references were very much 1960s experimental systems music. A lot of humorous music, like the music for the Carry On films, for instance. I don't know whether that was a sort of genre, the comedy genre of films in the 60s in Britain. A lot of modern dance music and things. So, and I wanted it to be humorous, to reflect my big sort of take on this was to try and make it as funny within the darkness as possible. And I think there is a way of doing this series that you could have made it very dark and there'd be not very much humour. So I think the music had to bring out that humour as well as the acting and the general approach. Yeah, so that's our approach.
What's very interesting in the music is it's really playing part of the writing. It's under the scene. It's really, you have a lot of sound design in the series, right? A lot of added noises and added ambience. There's a lot of work on the sound design.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of, I've got a large palette of drones, so we use a lot of drones throughout, and that really is part of the language of, the paranoid language, the grammar of the piece. It's shot like that as well, and the way that the piece is put together is very much demanding of the audience to be wanting to know what's next. And so the sound design is part of that as well.
And you used the sound designer that was also the sound recorders, so they were there while you were shooting and able to kind of follow that right the way through to sound design.
Yeah, that's right. I work with a sound recordist called Tim Barker who records all the sound, and then he'll be recording all sorts of things on set which we might use as sound design in the end, and then he'll do the sound editing and the sound design in the post-production process.
Yeah, very interesting. Are you doing a second season or?
Yeah, we just started working on that at the moment, so we start shooting that in October. Another 6 episodes.
So what happens if you give the solution that we don't want to know about this one? How do you trigger the start of the second one? It's another Utopia, or what is it? Not giving us the solution of the first season.
I just think with Utopia, nothing is ever as it seems, so even when you feel that you've got some kind of resolution, nothing is ever as it seems. Don't rest easy.
And are you selling the show in other countries than UK?
Yeah, so I've got some...
Oh, you found the numbers.
Yeah.
It's been making research all night.
So I think Shine International, who are responsible for selling it, aren't massively pleased with how it's going to go down in terms of sales, in all honesty.
It's a good company to be with and good company to please.
But it's not doing too badly. So they've confirmed sales in Canada with Bell Media, Spain, Prisa TV, Latin America with HBO, pay TV, China, Youku, VOD, Norway, TV2, SVOD, France, Canal Plus, pay TV.
Oh, France Canal Plus.
Yeah. Australia, SBS, free TV, Turkey, DigiTurk, pay TV, Australia, New Zealand, Roadshow, DVD, Germany, RDL, pay TV, and Africa, Canal Plus, pay TV.
We never had such a precise list of the countries sold.
So yeah, that's where they are. But I don't think...
nothing in the US yet.
Well, in the US, the format has sold, so there's going to be a remake for HBO, as far as we understand.
It's kind of strange to do a remake of something that's English and so good, but...
Yeah,
Are you involved in the remake? No, not yet.
No, I think David Fincher is going to direct it, so I don't think I'll have a look in. So I mean, you know, I know. I think actually it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
I think it's got an American independent type feel to it, so I can see it working quite well as an American remake. Actually, I don't think either of us are offended by the idea, are we?
No, I think if anyone's going to make a hash of it, then let it be David Fincher. I mean, you know, it's going to be wonderful to see what he does.
Well, actually, I think for you it's an honor. Like, you know, he's going after you, which means he's going to copy what you did, so it's kind of good.
Doubt it.
Are you going to be involved in the second season as a director?
Yes, and I'm an exec producer as well on the second season. So we've been working, Rebekah and I have been working with the writer Dennis for the last 4 or 5 months or so.
Great. Je ne sais pas s'il y a des questions dans la salle. Oui.
What about the yellow? Was it your idea to put it in almost every scene?
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, the yellow bag was, as I said before, the yellow bag was written into the text, into the scene. But it just became one of those things as a director where you think, oh, this is fantastic, I love this yellow bag. And also the idea that it becomes like a separate character that you can track towards, and then you know, and with its little smiley face handle on it, we use that. And then it sort of sparked off a lot of other yellow stuff. And then when Channel 4 saw the cut, they created an ident which was yellow with a... Well, actually, no. What happened was when we showed the piece, we put to executives and to producers. We cut it into 4 parts, like, because this, when it goes on the air, it's got commercials in between, and when we cut to the commercials, it's got a Utopia logo. So we put Utopia in Futura, which we thought was a sort of good utopian font, onto yellow, and then the yellow just took hold after that, you know, and all the posters became yellow. So it was sort of very much a sort of organic thing that just happened, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's also the fact that we went to a marketing meeting really, really early on about how they were going to market it, and Channel 4 came up with all these photographs and images from things like spooks and all sorts of kind of very traditional conspiracy thrillers that were all very dark and very grey, and you could hardly really see what was going on. And then obviously they'd not seen anything of what we were doing at the time, and we showed them a trailer which had lots of the landscapes and the yellow in it. But then we weren't really able to tell them anything about the story because everything was a giveaway. So they came away from the marketing meeting with the notion that we couldn't really market it with any information, but the only thing that we could say about it was that the colour yellow was important. So from that point on, it was just, the marketing was just yellow, really.
And does the graphic novel exist or not?
No, you know, that was a big part of the art department's job, was to create this graphic novel. It's really sort of even in Dennis's script, it's an incoherent mass of supposedly incoherent, apparently incoherent mass of different sections as you see it in the manuscript, which has a really interesting payoff in the later episodes. But no, we created it in the style of, we referenced a lot of 1970s graphics, things like Oz and IT magazine, but also a graphic artist called Dave McKean, who done a lot of work with Neil Gaiman in the 90s. So it's very much based on that, a sort of mad, sort of paranoid version of that.
And the marketing department was attempted to really release the graphic novel in the bookstores.
I think Kudos are aware that that probably is something that they want to do at some point, but not immediately. I think they see that more as a Series 2 thing. I mean, it does exist at the moment as a kind of action prop, and we actually got a load printed for all the cast and the crew. So there are a few on eBay, I think, probably. But I think Kudos will at some point actually probably work with graphic artists to produce some merchandise, but they didn't want to do that yet.
Yeah, there's a big trend now in releasing new programs called what they call the transmedia, as you know, where there is a TV series, then there's a website, then there is a...
We did that. Channel 4 put a separate budget together, so we were actually given another, well, it wasn't us, we worked with another company, and they put another budget of £150,000 together. There was actually quite a big transmedia project that went alongside that was sort of semi-successful. I think it's probably perceived as successful. We found it a very difficult process because there are some really deep underlying themes for Utopia, and it was difficult for that to translate. We found in the transmedia kind of project, but yeah, so that did go alongside.
Other transmedia, you had a website?
Yeah, it wasn't a special website. It was first of all, it was a kind of, it's difficult to describe. What we were pitched, which would have been absolutely fantastic, was a kind of. At the point where we started the Transmedia project, you would have been able to, somebody could have logged on to have a look at whatever this thing, Utopia, was, and you could actually find out an awful lot of information from them with very little information given. So you would have been able to, just by going there, cookies could have come onto your computer and actually found out who you were, flicked up some pictures from Facebook of you and your friends, and found out quite quickly where you live, and all of those things. And it was so.
The next day you're dead.
Well, yeah. What was created was a transmedia project that was all about how quickly the network could find you. So, and the first element of that was actually quite successful. So, you logged on, you gave very little bit of information about what type of phone you had and what city you lived in, and quite quickly it would have a clock counting down and saying, 24 hours the network will find you, you better be on your way. And that was quite, it worked quite well because you could then Facebook your results, and somebody would, so people would all kind of, the currency in, I did it in 17 hours, or I've only got 23 minutes. And it also makes you think, well, maybe I'll change the settings on my phone. So, and the next stage of it was much more about that, so it started being a bit more about what you could do to change your visibility and have a bit more control over your privacy. But it was a difficult thing to try and achieve, and the second and third section became a bit less successful, I think. But I think you can probably find it.
In terms of success, do you know how many hits on this website, for example?
It was massive, actually. I don't have the details here, but it did create a good response.
And that was released simultaneously at the airing of the series, of course?
Yeah, just a little bit before. So when the trailers were released, so about a week before, I think, the How Long Will the Network Get You element was made live. And then in week 3, the second element was made live, and then in week 5, the third element. Because once you find out what it's all about, the third element kicked in. So we couldn't do the third element until you had watched the 5th episode and worked out what it's all about.
Interesting.
It's very cryptic, sorry.
Because I've got a lot of writers here. I've got an upstream question and a downstream question. Okay. First is because you mentioned that this was an original idea or story from somebody else, which was passed on to Dennis Kelly, who made it his own, and then Mark, you made it your own as a film. So there's kind of an authorship dimension in the directing as well. Okay, can you tell us first the legal and royalties situation with the person who had the original idea?
Yeah, it was a person who worked for a company who had the original idea, so it was just a kind of half a page of an idea that a couple of series came out of. And the legal and royalty situation is there's a format payment. So a small format payment is made at the beginning of production to that company to cover off that element.
It's buyout, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. And the second question is because Fincher is now going to use your great ideas and make something far more expensive and commercially valuable. Do you have any authorship in the American version? I'm sure Dennis does because he wrote the original script.
Yes. The truth is, it makes me sound really stupid, but I don't know completely. Interestingly, Fincher is talking about Rian Johnson, who wrote and directed the film Looper, writing the series. So, even Dennis won't be involved, which is interesting, So he's really, apparently he's a law unto himself. He'll do what he wants, and everyone's obviously very happy with that, And I'm sort of intrigued by that as well. But I don't, the format sale comes from, Shine, and I'm, that they will, they will make money. I don't think I have any ownership of that.
Oui, il y a une question.
I would like to know a little more about, even though you were not involved at the beginning, do you know anything about how he got the idea afterwards, Dennis, and how he developed it and how long it took? Because he worked, I understand, alone on the 6 episodes.
He didn't work alone, he worked with the execs at Kudos, so Karen Wilson and Jane Featherstone, I think, were very heavily involved working with him. All I know about that is that he was really intrigued in a group of sort of hapless, normal people, so people like himself. He was really, really keen that they weren't superheroes, that they didn't have superpowers, that they were people who would be as crap as he would be in this situation, being thrust into this situation. And I think, only small elements of the idea had already been there. Perhaps the comic book had already been there, so I think it had come out of the comic book. But in terms of who the network were and what their mission was and all of that, I think, it all came from Dennis's twisted mind.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Dennis in Ian, the character Ian. Because he came to writing quite late in life, Dennis Kelly, and he's most known for writing plays. He's written a lot of plays, and I think before and probably while he was starting off doing that, he did a lot of really dead-end jobs where he was sort of brighter than most of the people in the jobs, and definitely thought he shouldn't be there. So I think that exchange that Ian has with his boss right at the very beginning that feels very much like Dennis.
I think he'd admit that as well.
Yeah, the wider themes, I don't know how personal those are. He's certainly very well read, and what really drew me to the project was that the subject, which it is eventually about, which I'm not going to tell you, is totally prophetic and visionary, and something that we don't talk about, but actually is a very, very real issue. So, that comes from his reading. It's probably not a personal issue, but it's a sort of brilliant twist on the sort of issues that we are concerned with today, environmental issues.
I think Dennis also, his work often involves a kind of discussion of violence, and I think that's come very much, so the blackness of that is very much come from Dennis.
I don't actually know his plays, I'm ashamed to say, so I don't know whether they're full of violence. I do know that one of them's set in a bunker, however.
And do you work more with him on the second season, now that it's being written, than the first season, obviously?
Yeah, we're working quite, we are. We were there right at the very beginning, we're working quite closely with him. There's some sort of quite audacious idea. I don't think it's, I can tell you that the first episode is set in 1974, when Carvel, the writer of the drawer of the comic book, is a young man, and it starts at a Bilderberg group conference. It's not really Bilderberg, but it's something like that in Britain.
Une autre question? Dernière peut-être.
sorry, will the second season as violent as the first one? Because I heard Channel 4's viewers complain about the violence, so will you keep the violence?
There were really actually hardly any complaints in comparison with how much people generally complain about all sorts of things. So honestly, I think actually...
The more violent you are, the less complaints you have.
No, I think people really understood that the violence was editorially justified, that there was a really good reason why the violence was there. And actually every time there's a newspaper in the UK called the Daily Mail, which tends to get upset about this kind of thing. And when the Daily Mail got upset about this, actually there was a huge storm of people going on their website and backing up why the violence was there and why there was a specific reason for all of the elements that are in there. So I think there was a real understanding actually amongst the audience of what the point of this was, and that it wasn't pointless, and had it been pointless and been doing it. Having said that, I do think Series 2 probably will be less violent just by its, I don't know, maybe it won't. But we're hoping that, well, Channel 4 wanted to go on at 9 o'clock rather than 10 o'clock this time. So that may have a sort of slight effect.
Une petite question, non? Si, là-bas.
Will you work with the same composer too?
Yes, yeah. No, I think he's brilliant. I'm trying to get him to do more work because he doesn't compose for TV. He's done my series, he did the last series that I did, and that's it. He's not. I mean, everyone loves the music, but no one's giving him any jobs. And he'd love to move over from Montreal. His whole family's in Paris. You know, his father and his sister, and he'd love to move over to Europe at a drop of a hat to compose music for European TV.
Well, after that screening, you might get some calls.
Oh, yes.
I hope so.
And perhaps just another remark to the violence, because it's true, you really don't film the violence really very... it's more because it's so psychological, it's so strong. It's like a Kubrick, yes, it's like a Kubrick violence. It's a bit this thing, it's very, very strong. You're really you're feeling it physically, but you're not showing it so much, so that's really great.
I think that's really, really important. Actually, a better reference for the violence was, when we first talked about this, I'm a great lover of Polanski's films that he made in the mid-60s, and a big reference for me was Cul-de-sac, and the psychological violence that goes on there, and the humour as well, because I think it's really, really important that there's a sort of warped humour that goes with it. But you cannot, you know, it's not Gus and Noé, or it's not, you know, it's not something like that. It's not something which is designed to make you squirm and alienate you. It's very much it still tries to do those traditional things of sucking you into the story and seducing you in some sort of way.
You said Kubrick too, and Orange Mechanic, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's... Yes, yeah, I think that is right. I think Kubrick's just more of a technical influence because he was such a technical master, you know. But obviously that film, Clockwork Orange, has got a lot of parallels with this in terms of its humour.
Okay, je pense que toutes les questions. Well, I think we're okay, we're done. Well, thank you very much. No more questions. Thank you very much, Marc. Thank you.